an app that was recently launched. Basically, the goal is really to connect folks and communities. And we're going to be also talking with the executive director of the National Black Justice Coalition, Mr. David Johns, about the interplay between technology and specifically Haber and how we can be using technologies to keep our communities more safe. So I'll just go ahead and kick it right off. Keola, just tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us about Haber. Tell us about, what really prompted the idea.
Hi. So hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Megan, for having me. Thank you, David, for joining. And my name is Keola, first of all, and I started Haber in 2016. And being a new mom and trying to find a safe place for me and my daughter and my family, my growing family at the time, was a big deal. It was the first time I started looking for a place to live through the lens of, is it safe enough for me to, bring my child there? Are we going to be up all night? Can I take her out, for a walk in the neighborhood? And Haber was just an idea that I had, kind of like, I was an avid like Yelper and researcher whenever it came to, figuring out where I'm going to go to eat, where am I going to go hang out, even on like vacation, TripAdvisor, like, we do the research, and but we do all of this extensive research when it comes to like traveling and like eating out. But when it comes to like you're finding your home, there wasn't that much information available outside of asking the realtor, as like you couldn't ask a neighbor per se unless you knew someone that already lived there, which that hardly ever is the case.
Right.
So I just thought to myself, why isn't there a platform where I can reach out to the people who actually lived in the building before and say, hey, what was your experience like? And that's where the wheels started turning. And, we created an app back in 2016 and launched it then. And it basically, in this time, I've been trying to, figure out, outside of just having ratings and reviews, how can we use it to build more of a connection between neighbors, so that I can't just have the ability to reach out. I think one of the benefits to this new launch that we have now, this new release, is that we can actually communicate with the people in the building once we join the building. So once you sign on to Haber and you join a community or a building, then you have access to everyone else who is subscribed to that building as well, and you can have a conversation and you can ask specific questions and actually meet people that live there without physically meeting people that live there. So that's Haber is right now, and I'm really excited about this version of it and interested to see how it helps build communities.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really exciting. There is something to be said about how, large social media platforms like Facebook, but I think, what your app is really bringing to the table is really creating a microcosm, creating where people who being that everything is so digital now, you're kind of missing that community and connection. I think this is a great way to integrate that. So with that being said, I'd love to kick it to David. In your position as a leader of an organization, as someone who builds communities and brings communities together, can you just speak to a little bit about how a Haber or apps like Haber can benefit, why apps like Haber are important?
Yeah, I can definitely do that. I appreciate Keola for her leadership. And there are two words that come to mind to me that I will talk about. One is community, and the second is safety. I'll start at the end and then I'll work my way backward. So I lead the National Black Justice Coalition. We're the nation's only civil rights organization intentionally and unapologetically at the intersections of racial equity and LGBTQIA+ equality. And that's important now because it is often the case that Black people in America don't feel safe. Us leaving our homes, if we are lucky enough to have a home, often puts us at risk of encountering police or state-sanctioned actors who believe that they've been appointed to act as police who are policing our moves and dictating where we can and can't go and what we can and can't do while we're there. There are laws in a lot of the states where Black people are disproportionately concentrated that still make it legal to deny us access to public accommodations, things like gas stations or hospitals or even restaurants, right? And when you are Black and have an intersectional identity, so you are Black and queer or trans or non-binary, or you are Black and have a disability, or you're Black and you're a single parent, or you're Black and you're a young parent, when you're Black and ... you're exposed to more violence, you're exposed to more forms of institutional oppression. And so having resources like Haber that allow you to cut through the malaise, that allow you to connect with real people, that allow you to do things that you can't really do on Yelp or on Facebook is incredibly important, especially because the safety of Black people is often in question. It is now August. Every week rather, since the beginning of June, there have been at least 2 Black trans women or femme-identified folks murdered that we know of. And so their ability to engage in community conversations using apps and other tools like Haber can be life-saving. The second thing that comes to mind around, I'm sorry, am I talking too loud?
Oh no, I said right. No, I'm agreeing.
The second, this is why this is better in person, these conversations. The second part is community, right? I laughed when you started to talk about both the blessing and the curse of digital platforms. And you know, Facebook is the platform that shall not be named because they're not being as responsible as they otherwise could be, and holding people accountable for telling the truth. And I remember when Facebook was initially established, when my mama couldn't get on Facebook, when you had to be at not only a university, but at a certain group of universities as it was rolled out. And the thing that I enjoyed most then that I miss now is that while I felt more connected to people that I wouldn't see because we didn't live in the same dorm, or maybe we didn't go to the same university, there was still an actual community. And because Facebook has grown and is a global entity that, you know, there are very few barriers to entry aside from those that require you to have technology and broadband access, which again, if you're poor, you're a person of color, you're queer, or you have a disability, is significant. I don't want to diminish that, but there are lots of people on it and it can be really challenging to establish community. There are similar apps, Kyola and I were talking about this, that will allow you to ask questions of people in a vicinity or in a community, but not one that allows you to ask the kinds of questions that you otherwise might want to ask your neighbors. And so as we think about what it means to live under quarantine still in this pandemic caused by COVID and the related crises that so many of us are experiencing, having tools like Haber are incredibly important.
Absolutely. And I think another part of that conversation, you know, once again, speaking about the platform that we're not naming right now, but, you know, that's a huge platform. That's a huge company, multi-billion-dollar company. And I think that another part of this discussion really should talk about Yola and the representation that she brings to the table. You know, I worked with some women on Capitol Hill on a roundtable for women tech founders. And the data that we found was really disheartening. When we talk about venture capital, we talk about representation of women in tech, and then also Black women in tech, the numbers are startling. Can you just both talk a little bit about, you know, for example, how, you know, apps like Haber are basically stepping into the future, connecting community in the context of the way that the world is moving, and why that ties to why it's so important for more people like Keola to have the opportunity to be properly invested in?
So thank you for asking that. My experience actually, you know, like I said, I've been doing this since 2016, and you know, the times that I've, you know, pitched and, you know, met with investors, I've always been the Black person or the Black woman in the room. And it's, you know, it's challenging because we, like, even coming into it, you know, that's going to be a hurdle that you face. And that a lot of times the people that are sitting on the other side of the investor desk is, you know, they don't look like us, you know. And so it's almost like you have to build that credibility. And a lot of times it's like, well, even I'll tell you, I'm not from, like, I don't have a tech background. Like I come from media. All of my experience has been in media and project management, but you know, I'm also like I've had a lot of experience. You know, I'm very experienced. Like I have a lot of tech information, it's because I do study a
Right.
significant amount. And, you know, because like I said, I built this from the ground up. Like I didn't essentially know how to sit there and wireframe when I first started, but that's something that I learned. And I sat there and I drew everything out, and I, you know, studied how an app should function, and I created the whole the user journey. Like that's stuff that I had to do on my own. But, you know, so a lot of people are just, you know, even investors are like, well, you know, she's not from Silicon Valley. She didn't do this. Like, it's almost like you have to start from behind the eight ball. And it was, you know, for me, there was a level of like imposter syndrome. I think we experienced that a lot, especially, right. You know, everyone is already saying that they don't have as much faith in us as they do. And then we kind of take a little bit of that on, even if we know our capabilities. And it was disheartening in the beginning, but seeing how far the app has come, seeing how, and just understanding the value in what I am trying to build, that's kept me going. And but it's hard. It's difficult to see that we are such a small percentage of the companies that get invested in. But I choose not to focus on that too much, because I do know a lot of Black women in tech and entrepreneurs that have been successful, and those are the people that I follow, I reach out to, I build connections with, because they understand. And I'll say Black women reach back. They do. Like I talk to like somebody that I reach out to is like Angela Benson. She's incredible. And I reached out to her early when I started the app, and she would like just give feedback on what I was doing, and, you know, say, you think about this, and, you know, you might want to look into this and research this, or talk to this person, because it's not easy, and the info isn't readily available. So, and, you know, other people that are in the field that don't look like us aren't necessarily taking us that seriously. So for me, it's always been just to push a lot of what is the reality according to the numbers out of my head, and to continue to do things and to progress my app and my business the way that I know that the impact that it's going to create. So as difficult as it is, it's been even better, you know, having people see the value in it as well.
Absolutely. I'll pose a slightly different question to you, David. When we're talking about representation in tech, some things that we think about are the algorithms that are used to design and target information on platforms and on online communities like Haber and others. David, could you just talk a little bit about why representation is important, you know, in terms of development of algorithms and how that impacts the communities that you represent in your organization?
Yeah, I love the question. It always makes me think about when I learned the story of airbags and how it was the reality that engineering teams, being the way that most things are when we don't have conversations acknowledging not only equity, but that the reality is that most things that are good in the world are because of women, and in particular Black women, that people fail at things. And so as I understand it, many of the car companies that were attempting to make airbags because people were dying during car accidents were mostly white men. And they were designing airbags to fit themselves, and people were still dying when they were then testing out the product. And it was not until engineering teams diversified and brought on women engineers and engineers of color that they found a way to engineer airbags that fit more people and reduce the overall number of deaths. It's also why we have cup holders, because women are smart and they think about things that men don't think about, right, in engineering teams. And so I say that as an example that's not really mired right now in talking about intersectional challenges that people might face when they're trans, gender nonconforming, or they're otherwise queer, but just to acknowledge the importance of diversity. And the reality is that all companies, and we continue to talk about tech companies as if you can actually exist in our global reality and not be tech-based in some way, which to me complicates what it means to think about tech companies. But that having been said, the reality is that the plurality of diversity that exists in our country should be reflected in our workforce in every sector. And we know that when that happens, we all win. The other thing that I think is really important to your question about algorithm development and what this means for diversity is that when tools, when algorithms, when apps, when user experiences are designed with diversity accounted for, and I mean diversity with capital D, right?
Right.
Not just, again, with regard to sexual identity, gender orientation, or expression, but thinking about people who have disabilities. Many Black people have disabilities because we were born with them, or we've been made to have them as a result of the anti-Blackness and white supremacy. And so having those considerations be a part of the process from the beginning means that once people, diverse people, are able to access the app, they will then find a place for themselves in it. It also will reduce the likelihood of algorithms being misused or being used in ways that trigger people or otherwise cause additional harm, which is something that's incredibly important when you think about the experiences of people who are, again, Black and queer, trans, or non-binary, thinking about algorithms, or even thinking about language that might not be sensitive to pronouns, or diverse forms of gender expression, or just diverse forms of being. Will make it so that people don't feel a part of a community and otherwise are unable to use an app that's supposed to be designed for them to celebrate community and otherwise feel safe.
Absolutely. I think, in this conversation, I feel like, talking about Haber and talking about Keola and talking about, the way that you self-taught yourself to, engage in tech and how it had an outgrowth from a real problem really underscores everything we've been talking about. Tech is integrated in all forms and sectors of our life. And I think that the more we have these conversations, we have folks like Keola who are, being leaders, and folks like you who are also stepping out and speaking up for these communities, we'll really start to see and develop change, because it's definitely necessary.
Can I say one thing before you go to the next question, which is to acknowledge that, like, what you said is so true. And my worry, let me back up and say that I just want, because I've not said this to Keola, I'm so very proud of her. If that does nothing more, her having found a way to hack a solution to a problem that was real in her life is significant. And that's what Black folks do, right? Like, there are Black folks giving ride shares before Uber made it a thing, right? And so what I worry most about is that entrepreneurs, Black women like Keola, we were talking earlier about our sister friend, Suzette, we were also talking about Ifioma Ike, right? Like, Black folks who innovate in ways that Keola has. And I say this knowing that she's faced challenges that would break the average mediocre white boy who's been given these tools that she had to teach herself. I want to celebrate her having done that work. And I want to be clear that what often happens is that success looks like a company like Facebook buying or stealing Haber, right? And stealing the equity that she has invested. And I want us all to be mindful of that and to protect her and her work as she continues to provide solutions for our community.
Yes, absolutely. I think that, I would love to have, you or you and Keola to come back for another conversation. We could just have a whole conversation talking about IP, talking about patent ownership. I feel like that is the part of the conversation that's missed. A lot of time we're talking about access to capital and access to education. That's also important, but ownership is really key. That's the way we're going to be able to protect these inventions and really build equity in this space. And speaking of building equity in this space, I want to kick Keola. Tell us how we can support. Tell folks, are you raising money? We know that you recently launched. Let us know where we can find Haber. Let us know, if you want to be speaking somewhere else, because it starts here. We have to, create these platform forms for each other, and just let us know how best we can support you.
Thank you so much. Right now, the current version that is the release that is now in the Apple Store it's only available in New York City and New York, New Jersey, and on iOS currently. And that's because we want to just make sure that we're doing the right things and that it's actually servicing the communities that we would like for it to service, and we're kind of just giving it a chance to evolve at this point. So right now we're just asking people to download the app, add their building if it's not there, join their building, and start just using it. Like, dig into it. Let us know what's working and what's not working. Because as much as having a product out there is fun and it's an incredible, we actually need people to tell us what they need and how it could work better for them. And if adding something like like David said, like just identifying your community. Like let's say we want to identify a building as someplace where, you know, LGBT people are, they feel like they feel safe there. There's a community there. Like feel like for me, when I was finding a place as a mom, finding other moms was really important for me, and that was what I identified at that point. It was really important to have some place where I can go, and I know there's other kids there. My daughter is very social, and just being able to say that this is some place that I know that I can have that kind of support was really important. So for me, that's something. If there's moms that can reach out to each other within the app, and it's important for me to note that when you join a building, you join a community, you have access to communicate with the other people in the building, and those conversations. Those conversations are they're between you and that person, but you can also just have general conversations on the building page where you can ask a question, and you don't have to essentially join the building community and have direct contact with the people who have also joined that same building. But it's a way for you to not, like, I don't have to run into someone to find out that they live in my building, which is now, especially with COVID, I'm never outside. So running into people is a thing of the past. Like, you know, it was easier pre-COVID, but now it's even just going through this, it was just finding anyone at this point to say, like, hey, to check in. Are you guys okay? Hey, I have like a neighbor that's an older woman that, you know, she always like collects the packages, and she'll like, and we exchange numbers, because she'll text me and say, hey, I saw your package in the lobby, I picked it up. And all COVID, I'm just like, do you need something? I'm running to the store, I'm making a store run, I can pick you up something, but I only have her information. There's like 80 apartments in my building, and I could have, you know, helped someone else that needed something that didn't necessarily couldn't make it out until a few days later, or whatever the case may be. But it's like, you don't know anyone because we just live there. We're not necessarily living there and thinking beyond making friends, or even just like being a neighbor anymore. Like, that's not even an idea like that we do anymore. Like I when I was growing up, I knew everyone in my building, but it was a small building. We don't have that kind of community anymore, and that's what I'm trying to put back into the world with this app.
Well, I'll go ahead and leave it there. I think that your neighbors are lucky to have you. Your children are lucky to have you. You know, thank you both. Thank you, David, also for taking the time. I'm glad we got to touch on some really important issues. I look forward to future conversations.
Thank you so much, Megan. It was a pleasure. And thank you, David.
Pleasure. Thank you both.
Thank you. Okay. All right.
Yola, we haven't even talked about, are we still recording?
Yes.
We're still recording. Hold on. Let me see if I could stop it.